Hi, I'm Liz Larson with The Art of Frosting. Welcome back if you've been with me before, and welcome if you're here for the first time. Today, I'm actually going to make this kind of minimalist cake with these mums. I think they're called star asters. If they're not, and you do know what they're called, please write in and tell us. I actually saw these in a florist shop and I took a picture of them. I just love them and wanted to figure out how to make them. Now, these could have been made with gum paste or something else. Royal icing as well you could use. Today I'm going to use candy melt. The reason is that I have no patience. And gum paste or royal icing are going to take days to dry, and I want to do it now. And the candy melt tastes good and is super quick. I love it. So it was the perfect project. I have to tell you guys though that I didn't know how to do this. I had to practice. So I went through several generations, and if you join me on The Art of Frosting on Facebook, you'll see the first and the third generation. I was working on it, but I needed to figure out exactly how it would work. So these got really close, these cupcakes. I liked the way it turned out, and I was ready to go ahead and do them on a cake. So I just want you guys to know that if you see something, especially a flower, something else, take some time to figure out how it works. It's a lot of fun, a little work, a lot of fun, and can be really rewarding. So let's get started. I'm really excited to show you guys this brand new technique. And it's new for me too. You'll see me putting these on for the first time ever. Let's get started. We've made ganache a few times, but I just want to go back over it. It's been a while since we did it, and it's essential for the style of this cake, so I want you guys to see how to do it. I've got 10 ounces of dark chocolate. These happen to be dark chocolate squares. You want dark chocolate to get the dark color, but you could do it with milk chocolate if you want a lighter color. And I'm using heavy cream. So notice that this says old-fashioned heavy cream. Some of the ultra pasteurized have a little too much water and they'll seize your chocolate. So look for an old-fashioned or something that doesn't say ultra pasteurized on it. So I'm going to dump my heavy cream in. This is less about a measurement and more about seeing where it covers the chocolate. I'm going to want a fairly thin ganache. So I'm just going to dump my heavy cream in until it just barely covers my chocolate, or at least most of it, about that much. Now I can feel that it's about half of my container here, which this says it's 73 milliliters or a pint. Next, we need to put this in the microwave, and we want to put it on half power 1 minute at a time. Now you can do this over a double boiler if you want to heat it that way, or on some low heat. For me, I find it easiest to do in the microwave 1 minute at a time on half power. And just a side note, always use glass or metal if you're doing it on the stove, but glass if you're putting it in the microwave. No plastic. My ganache here is melted to the point where it looks a little bit milky. You can see that my chocolate is melted, but it's not completely incorporated. We need to keep mixing, keep blending until this gets a high gloss shine. I'm blended now. We've got a really nice shine. That's perfect. Now we want to see if our consistency is good enough. We want it to be able to flow down the sides of our cake. So you see how that's kind of falling in clumps? It's a little tiny bit too thick. It's not going to flow the way we want. It's not going to be thin enough. For the inside of your cake, that's perfect, but it's a little too thick. So we're going to add a little bit of milk, and it can be cool milk, not milk, heavy cream, just a tablespoon at a time, and do our reblending process. And we're going to keep lifting it and letting it come off till we get the consistency that we want. I think I've got it to where I want it. See how much thinner it is and how it pours smoothly off. That's about where I want. I want to check my temperature as well. It's just slightly warmer than body temperature or room temperature, and that's perfect. The next step is to have your cake on something that your ganache can drain through. So I've got a cookie sheet here and what can be your broiling rack or cooling rack. As long as they're really nice and clean, that works great. I've got some parchment underneath to catch the excess ganache so it doesn't go to waste. But this is a way that I don't have pooling or puddling. The excess just goes right off. So again, you want to make sure that your ganache is just barely warmer than body temperature or room temperature, and start to pour. Now just a little at a time, and let it flow from the top down. You do not want to have to put a spatula to this if you don't have to, because you don't want any marks. You want to work very quickly because it'll cool quickly. You can lightly spin your turntable. It'll actually help move the ganache down. And you want to let that sit probably for about 20 minutes to let it solidify up, or you can put the whole thing in the freezer for a few minutes. You just want to let it set up before you transfer it onto your platter. I forgot to tell you that these are actually 6-inch rounds. I just used 2 tall layers, and they are on a 6-inch cardboard. You want to make sure that your cake is on a cardboard so that you can transfer it. I want to move on now to our flowers, and what I'm going to be using here are candy melts. And recently I've gotten a lot of question about what are candy melts. This happens to be it's basically white chocolate that is colored. In this case, it's bright white. This happens to be a Wilton brand, but there are lots of other brands and even gourmet brands that you can find at your kitchen stores, candy making supply stores, even some of your grocery stores. I'm also using parchment paper. So parchment paper comes a lot of different ways. I happen to like this one only because it's waxed just slightly, and for this project it works great. But really any parchment paper will work, and you can also get this in your grocery store. So to begin, you want your white candy melt, and you want to melt it. Now we're melting it just like we did our ganache in the microwave in a glass bowl with 1 minute at a time, half power. You can do this over a double boiler or any traditional way to melt chocolate. You just don't want to overheat it. You want to be careful to do it slowly and a little at a time. Now I want to do it first because I do want it to cool. The cooler it is and still workable, the faster your flowers are going to dry. So I'm going to set that aside and take out my parchment paper. And I want these to be fairly large. And I also want to preserve the curve here. This is a 4-inch cake pan, and I'm just going to use a pencil. Because this is slightly waxed, a pen does not work. It comes right off, so use a pencil. And I'm going to mark out at least 3 of these. Just 3 circles like that, and then I'm going to go ahead and cut them out. So the next step that I want to do is actually cut a slit toward the center, but not all the way to the center. About 1/3 of a way around, cutting this in basically thirds. Now look what happens here. When I cut it in 3s, it automatically curves inward, and that's exactly what I want, because it will give me the curvature of my flower without actually having to do a lot of propping. So that's what you want. And I like 3 layers of this. You can do as many layers as you want. So my candy melt has cooled. I'm filling just a regular parchment triangle, and I've only filled here about halfway. You don't want your candy melt coming out the back side of this. So you want to just cut just the very tip off of this, just about like that, or about a number 4 writer is about all you want there. Now I've got a little candy melt here on my counter, but I'm going to place a couple of drops of candy melt just to tack this down so that I can work with it. I'm going to drop a line here of a circle just to keep that space open, and then I'm just going to start to pull. And you want to pull heavier at the beginning and then release towards the end to get a nice tip. Now, one big mistake that I made, that I think I made, is that I made these really regular, so very equal distant, and it's kind of a mistake because in nature they're not that way, and I think it made my design a little too even. So So you want to just keep pulling them out, and if you can, make them a little irregular. So here I'm going to maybe leave a gap. You can also break tines off to make it a little more irregular if you want to as well. When you're done, you want to delicately pry up the spots that you tacked it down and just let it flip up on its own and set that to the side. We're going to repeat that again, but this time we want our tines to be shorter. So start to pop them out here and make them shorter, not all the way to the end. And again, try to make them slightly irregular. And the third one is going to be even smaller than this. On my last one, I want my cupping to be a little bit more. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this one in my parchment so that I've got more of a cup. You also could just leave it outside the parchment like this and just prop it up like that. While my flowers are drying, I want to transport my cake onto my platter here. This is a little platter with a stem on it. I really like these. I think they're pretty. I'm going to put down just a little bit of that white chocolate that we used for our flowers because I want to glue my board to my platter because I don't want it to move or slide. So this is where having an offset spatula, if you guys can see this one, it's a spatula that kind of has a little jog in it, is really essential. You know that I don't expect you guys to have a lot of tools, but this is one. If you find one, pick it up. I pick one up whenever I see one. So you want to be able to slide that under your board. You can see that it'll start to move. Get a finger under there and move it towards yourself and slightly off your cookie sheet to get your hand under it. Get your hand firmly under it before you move. Move it over. Get your fingers out first with your offset under it, and then get it centered. And there you go. Move it without it being damaged. We're about ready to start assembling our flower. Attempting to. Now remember, I'm doing this for the first time too. Not making the flower, but putting it on this kind of a cake. That's the fun of cake decorating. It's all really a big experiment. So to move on, we need 2 more parchment bags. One, we are going to take some green food coloring and some yellow food coloring, and we're going to do, guess what? Color striping. Not like we haven't done that one before. So we're just going to take our bag and stripe just a little bit of yellow right up one side, the dry bag, and just the tiniest pinch of green up the other side. And I mean just the tiniest pinch. When I did my experiments, I thought that it was a little too green and a little too heavy, so I want it lighter. We're going to go ahead and fill that with a little bit of icing. And then our other bag, we're just going to fill with white, because we are going to use it as a few more petals on our flower. Now, I think you could probably do this with candy melt, but I like the control that the icing gives me. Now, if you're doing this with buttercream, it will dry hard as well. It takes a little while, an hour or so, but it will dry hard as well. Squeeze that out onto a surface, that's what I'm doing here on the side, till you get the colors that you want. The combination. It may take a little while to get the green and the yellow to come out evenly, but wait till you do that. Good. And the next one, just fill with some white icing. Now my candy melt petals have started to pull away on their own from the parchment, and that's how you really can tell that they're dry enough to use. So you just pull it away really delicately, and there you can see I've got the base of my flower. Now I'm going to start on top because I think it's going to be the easiest to see. And I want this to be right here on the corner. And luckily my ganache has enough body to it that it'll hold that right in place. Next, I need to choose the next smaller size. Now remember guys, you need to have made a lot of these because they will break, the tines will break. So you're going to very delicately peel, but you're going to lose some. I'm going to take my white icing And I'm going to put just a couple of dots here, not much because I don't want weight, and add my next layer. There you go. And now I need my smallest one, my center. Now you might want to actually stop here if you want to and just put 2 rows if you wish. I think that would work nicely as well. I'm going to put another couple dots of icing and add my 3rd row here. Just like that. Next, you want to have a straw on hand and a marshmallow. I've got a giant one, that's all I have on hand, but you could use anywhere from a mini to a regular size. And you can see that I've got this hole here, and that's for a reason, for my straw. One thing, it's going to allow me to pipe my center. Second, it's also going to hold that flower on. So I want to cut this straw down to about this. It's about 2.5 inches. I also want just a slice of marshmallow about the size of a small button. So you can see it's kind of flat like that. You can shape it if you want. In some of my earliest experiments with this, I made it a little too tall and I didn't like the way that looked. So I'm just going to put it on here and I'm going to let the straw peek out the top just a little. I'm going to trim that so that I'm sure it's gone all the way through. Next, I want to cut just the slightest tip off the end of my bag here. And I want to pull from the top. I want to squeeze and let it build and release. So I have nice tipped, pointed center. Now these are actually petals. They're not really a stamen. They're more of the actual petals unfolding. So I want them to be nice and tall, but also a very tight configuration, a very tight clump of them here. Next, I want to take my white. I'm going to turn this away from me and I'm going to pull up the back and in. Pull up, release to a nice point. Now you don't want all of these to be really tall. Some of them you want to kind of curve inward. That's kind of what the flower looks like. This sort of holds it, sort of cups inward. So just keep pulling them around. Again, you want this to be a little irregular. It's so hard for me to make it irregular. I want everything to be even. So keep pulling it around till it looks about like that. Now I'm going to take my scissors and very, very delicately get that centered. Make sure your scissors are at a place where you're not going to smash tines. Push it down as far as you can in. Now if your skewer bothered any of your center, just come back in and pull it back up. Now that you're here and you've got your center in, you can pull just a few more petals up like this. So it's a squeeze, let it build, release to a point, squeeze, let it build, release to a point. And you can add just a few more petals in there. Now I'm trying to even things out, I know, and we really don't want to do that. So let it be as random as you can. Next, we're going to move into our bottom flower, and I've chosen one that has petals that already kind of curve outward. Just touch it lightly so it'll grip. So I'm going to put just a dab of icing again, more towards the bottom. And I've chosen a really random, really irregular group of petals. So I'm going to have to put a little more icing. I'm going to actually have to build a little base here for it on the bottom. That's better. That wants to stick. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to leave it at 2 instead of 3 layers. Now this time I've actually extended my yellow and green down the sides a little bit, just for an experiment to see how that looks like, and then I'm going to pull the white up in between those just to see what that looks like. Now this is going to be a real trick getting this down in there in a way that we both can see here. I'm going to add just a few more petals in here. Now remember, we didn't add a third layer of candy melt, so I'm going to pull these out. And really this is just a squeeze, let it build slightly, and a long release. Well, we did it. We made this mum cake. These are pretty elaborate mums, but I have to say that once I figured out how to do it, they're super quick. So really in about 5 minutes, I made everything I needed for these, and then I just had to let them set aside to dry. So you could do those first and then do your ganache, but either way, both need to sit and dry for a few minutes, so find something else to do. Anyway, I really like the way this turned out. I wanted it to be kind of a minimalist cake. I didn't want to have any icing borders, so my ganache turned out really well. I didn't mess up the bottom, so it worked not to have a border. If you do happen to mess up the bottom in transporting the cake to the pedestal, you easily can just add a very simple border. Now you guys know me, and more is more, and I couldn't help it, and I had to add the third flower to the back. But it really was a good thing, because it allows me to tell you that this one I didn't use a skewer, which would be great if you're doing flat on top or flat on a cake where you don't need the skewer. I just cut the marshmallow, added a little extra icing, and I went ahead and piped that center right on the flower. It worked out really great. I also decided that I really did like that bit of green and yellow down the sides of the marshmallow as well. Like the way that turned out. So this is it for this week. Thanks for watching. You guys are amazing. You can find me at The Art of Frosting. You can find me at www.theartoffrosting.blogspot.com. You can also find me at curious.com, where I have a 10-lesson beginner's cake decorating course. Please subscribe if you haven't. Thanks so much for watching. See you all again really soon.